Hello, everybody out there listening to Wider. It is once again that time of the week. It's that time of the week where we come under your dial and we tell you what is really going on. We look at news stories and current events going on here in Kalamazoo, the county, the state, the country, and all over the world. We do intergalactic too, but I don't have the reach for that at the moment. This is Media Cyphers, where we dig underneath the headlines, tell you what's really going on, and call out the establishment on its BS. As always, the following thoughts, views, and opinions are not necessarily those of 89.1 FM WIDR Kalamazoo or Western Michigan University. No matter how dope or insightful they may turn out to be. First off, quick apology. Sorry we were not here last week. Sometimes life gets in the way. Again, as I like to emphasize, this particular program is brought to you by a bunch of working class, radical folks who maybe read a little bit. I was going to say too much, but I don't think you can really read too much. But so yeah, life got in the way, but we are back here, and I've got some really good material for everybody today. We're going to start with some local updates, and then we're going to be spending most of the show. I pre-recorded a segment with my co-host Lawrence, and we're going to be doing a deep dive. Our analysis, our critiques, our important observations about the first year of the Biden administration, as well as a couple of other national stories. But let's want to make sure let's start off. We've got a couple of local things that I wanted to talk about. And first off, I think we'll just kick right off with an important update, as we've been doing since this whole dang darn plague started. Give you the most recent information we have about what's going on with the Rona. I'm going to be reading from an article from Now Kalamazoo. Really great local independent journalism, by the way. And headline is, COVID update, deaths slower than expected, but still bad. This was written by Ben Jones. It was published on the 21st of this year. I'm going to read a little bit from Michigan, and then I'm going to really try to dive into what they have to say about Kalamazoo County. So, in the state of Michigan, it has been approximately 3 weeks since the number of daily new COVID-19 infections began to rise quickly. Spurred by the Omicron variant, new cases jumped from 8,000 per day in December 29th to 15,000 per day on January 7th to more than 17,000 per day on Wednesday. But the number of deaths hasn't kept pace. Deaths have been a lagging statistic of the COVID-19 pandemic. That means when infection numbers increase, historically deaths have increased about 2 weeks later. That has not been the case this time around. So again, maybe a little bit of, not great news, but better news. In its latest accounting on Wednesday, state health officials reported that Michigan was averaging 17,589 new cases of COVID-19 per day. That count has broken records with almost every report for the past month. Meanwhile, death numbers have not. Health officials reported a 7-day average of 107.43 new deaths per day on Wednesday. That number is extremely high, to be sure, but it isn't record-breaking, nor is it the stark increase from death averages before it. I think with that, I'm going to go ahead. This is zoning in on the county at the county level. Things have been different in Kalamazoo County. The daily average of new COVID infections has declined while deaths have gone up. Health officials reported on Wednesday that new cases of COVID-19 had dropped to 505.71 new cases per day on average. And again, that's here in Kalamazoo County. That's still the second highest number that average has been, but it's also lower than the 538 new cases per day that it was on January 10th. Meanwhile, health officials counted 11 new deaths from the coronavirus in Kalamazoo County since last Friday. That pushed the 7-day average upward to 2.14 deaths per day. Far from a record, but still a rise. Hospitalizations have gone down in Kalamazoo County just as they have in the state. The 2 county hospitals reported a combined COVID patient total of 135 people as of last Monday. That's still really high, and both hospitals are dealing with near-capacity situations. But it's a decline from the 142 people who were being treated a week earlier. So just a quick aside for everybody out there listening in Radio Land. I really just want to emphasize, keep masking up. If you haven't gotten vaccinated and boosted by now, please do. I hope we've covered on the show, Pfizer is bad, capitalism is bad, but the vaccines themselves are actually fairly effective. Again, our hats off to the workers over at Pfizer, the people who run the company, not so much. Again, if you're looking for the big conspiracy and all that, it's it's that these vaccines are being sold for profit, and for the most part are being poor people in poor countries, I should say, are being denied access to them. So really, if you haven't vaccinated boosted, please do so. There's a lot of misinformation out there, and if you trust your local lefty radio jockey, capitalism's the problem, not the vaccine itself. And also just emphasizing, hats off. There's a lot of local events that have been postponing because of the Omicron surge. And I really do want to emphasize, even if you have been vaccinated boosted, you can still get sick from it. Most common symptoms, you get a prolonged sore throat, fatigue, those sorts of things. So you're not going to be as doggedly sick as if you're unvaxxed or perhaps deadly. But if you feel those symptoms coming on, it might not be a bad idea to go get tested. Things have calmed down a little bit. It's a little easier to get at-home tests now. There's several stores around town that are giving away masks. Just about a week and a half ago, it was very dire. You couldn't find at-home tests to save your life. So all that is available. Really, please just delay your social calendar just a little bit. Because, we're trying to protect people with immunocompromised immune systems, and we're trying to protect people who, for whatever reason, either can't get vaccinated. So, really, we've just got to push a little bit further, and hopefully things will be looking a little brighter come spring, and we can start going out to our music shows and stuff like that again. So on that note, speaking of music shows, this is a local story. It's unfortunately a very serious one, and it hits very close to home, particularly for a lot of us here in the wider and the kind of independent Kalamazoo music community. But a local musician was recently featured, excuse me, in localspins.com, and it's talking about their current battle with cancer. And I'm not going to read this whole thing, but if you want to, the title of the article, The Creative Energetic Compass of Jitis Bags and Weathering the Dark Stuff of Brain Cancer. This is written by Enrique Olmos. And most of you may know Jitis. They've been making really great music in the community for years. They helped co-found a well-known Kalamazoo band, the Go-Rounds. And I'm just going to go ahead and kind of start reading from this. It's written from the perspective of the interviewer. So he describes kind of sitting in their living room and all that. We'll skip down a little bit. So they're talking to Graham Parsons in this part of the interview. Graham says, I think everyone goes back to how supportive and kind Jitis is, like a good listener and more into anything that you're doing than you're into. He's really good at getting people pumped about themselves and about the world around them, says Parsons, lead vocalist of the Go-Rounds. That's an incredible gift. He's just a total lightning rod of a creative person. There's a lot of things I could say, but those things are most important to me, just as a creative compass and almost maybe an energetic compass. Bags, 35, who was original founding member of the Go-Rounds, was diagnosed with terminal brain cancer last April after doctors found a large mass in the center of his brain. He was given 3 years to live. Leading up to the diagnosis, he experienced a host of health issues for more than a year, including debilitating seizures. He became introverted and isolated, and out of fear of having a seizure in a public setting. Then came surgery, radiation, and chemotherapy, which was successful in shrinking the tumor but left him sick and physically weak. His appetite waned. In the mornings, he'd often vomit due to the extreme nausea. He'd lost 30 pounds. He'd spent many of those days on the couch with a guitar pressed against his chest, while his spouse, Marguerite Meridian, cared for him. I sort of felt like I was watching myself floating overhead. I've always been a flighty artist, but I immediately had to become responsible for someone other than myself, she says, recounting the early days of the diagnosis. Bags was immediately supported by a fiercely loving community of friends and fellow artists. Musician Seth Bernard created the Jitus Bags Legacy Fund, a GoFundMe page to raise money for Bags to record a portion of his extensive catalog, an initiative that raised $26,570 in a matter of days. Again, I'd really encourage folks out there to check out the rest of the article. That GoFundMe, I do believe, is still live. It's very, very sad, but I'm hoping, personally, I'm out there, thoughts and prayers for Jitus, and hoping that not only they pull through, they can keep making incredible art for our community, and it is also really inspiring the way that we all come together when one of our own is in need and distress. And I thought that was just something important to highlight here on the show, and something that I'm sure a lot of my listeners out there would like to hear about. So, take a quick little break. When we come back, you will be hearing a long-form discussion with me and my co-host Lawrence. We're going to be talking about the first year of the Biden administration, and then later on, we'll be discussing a few national issues. Anyway, keep it dial locked. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers, only on 89.1 WIDR FM, or online at WIDRFM.org. You can also find us on Podbean. We have a podcast. We kind of put together the best of from our radio broadcasts and put them in a convenient form that you can download and listen to at your leisure. If you are a completionist, you want to hear exactly what goes on the radio, we also upload our full episodes onto our YouTube page. That's, again, Media Cyphers. We've got a Facebook, we got a YouTube, and we've got a podcast on Podbean. Anyway, keep it dial locked. We've got a lot more to talk about here on the show. This is Media Cyphers, your only source for political revolution.
Wider FM is the student-run radio station at Western Michigan University. Along with the Western Herald and Western Herald Video, Wider is part of the WMU Student Media Group and is supported in part through generous donations from listeners like you. If you would like to join this list of generous donors, please click the donate button at widrfm.org and support our mission for radio evolution. The website, once again, widrfm.org, on your radio at 89.1 Wider FM.
Hey, everybody. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers, only on 89.1 WIDR Kalamazoo, or online at widerfm.org. You can also catch us on our podcast. That's Media Cyphers Kalamazoo over on Podbean. Should be able to look it up on most podcast apps. As always, following thoughts, views, and opinions are not necessarily those of 89.1 WIDR or Western Michigan University, no matter how dope or insightful they may turn out to be. So today's show is going to be kind of composed of two main parts. We're going to do what we usually do, which is talk to y'all about the issues of the day. But it's also been 1 year since Biden took office. So we wanted to spend some time on this show doing our little year in review, talk a little bit about promises broken, talk a little bit about how the media is covering his first year in office. And like I said, we're also going to be covering some other issues. I know, Lawrence, you had a few in mind that you wanted to hit on. Can you tell folks a little bit about what they're going to be hearing later on in the show?
There's been some stories about Michigan University, and that's big in the news. Last Monday was Martin Luther King Day, and seeing how many people whitewashed Martin Luther King, and one person in particular, Steven Crowder, take his mask off on how he hates everything that King stood for. So you have those stories. There's a story in Kansas that makes you say, "What's the matter with Kansas?" And those few things. Those are a few of the stories that I particularly want to talk about. But year one Biden, we need to talk about it.
Yeah. So. Kind of start us off by saying there's one promise that I think he has definitely kept, and it was one he made in 2020 to a closed boardroom of some very wealthy Wall Street types saying nothing will fundamentally change. And, I don't want to gloss over, and we might spend some time talking about the American Rescue Plan, which did have some genuinely beneficial stuff in it. This has definitely been a lot of lowered expectations and a lot of punditry about why we're here, a lot of talking about Manchin and cinema. I think I want to frame our conversation. I'm going to read a quick excerpt from Left Voice. They recently made an article. They're doing a whole series about Biden year one, but I thought this would be particularly resonant for kind of conversation we're about to have. So this is from an article they wrote. The Democrats aren't bad at politics. Their politics are bad. And they go on to write, and again, you read the full article if you decide. The truth is, the Democrats are neither bad at politics nor hapless victims. From the perspective of their capitalist masters and backers, the Democrats are very good at politics. This is because the party's goal is to uphold capitalism. That is, maintain capitalist stability and keep profits flowing at the expense of the working class. In fact, it's worth reflecting on what the Democrats have accomplished in recent years. They successfully co-opted the 2020 uprising against police violence and channeled popular outrage to the ballot box. They united to block Bernie Sanders from clinching the nomination from the party's left wing and are skilled at stopping progressive campaigns in their tracks, like those of India Walton and Nina Turner, moving them to become pragmatic progressives. The Democrats are always able to pass exorbitant military budgets, most recently passing the largest one since World War II, and secure support and funding for Israeli violence toward Palestinians, even from some progressives. Both domestically and internationally, Biden has been successful at shoring up support for his rivalry with China, and I would also say Russia more recently. We'll get into that in a minute. As part of his project of restoring U.S. imperialism and hegemony to its former glory. While the Democrats pretend that their hands are tied when it comes to programs that help the working class and oppressed, there is seemingly no limit to funding or political will when it comes to imperialism. Likewise, the Biden administration has had no problem continuing and even expanding inhumane Trump-era immigration policies. Last month, the president reinstated the so-called Remain in Mexico policy, in which migrants seeking asylum in the U.S. are detained in Mexico while their applications are processed. In a deal with Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador, all migrants from the Western Hemisphere are now forced to stay in Mexico pending approval of their asylum applications. These squalid detention centers are dangerous, particularly during a pandemic, but the Democrats have largely succeeded in quelling outrage over kids in cages. Put simply, Democrats can be very effective when it comes to furthering their capitalist and imperialist interests. The reason why they don't fight tooth and nail to pass progressive legislation, and the reason why the party will never be a vehicle for socialism, is that it is not in their interest to do so. Again, that is an excerpt from an article from Left Voice. And it really sums up a lot of my feelings on it.
Facts.
We're going to go through a lot of these broken promises and stuff, but the way the mainstream media would frame it is that, Biden's been trying his hardest. He can't get these things done. It's either, blame Joe Manchin or Kristen Sinema. But this is really, this is the way the Democratic Party operates, and I'm gonna kick it to you for your response to that. But I also want to dive a little deeper into the role of like the Manchins and the Cinemas, and why Democratic Party always needs a scapegoat when they don't want to, when they want to play act like they're going to help the working class, but they don't actually end up doing it. Lawrence.
I mean, that article summed it up beautifully in a multitude of ways. When we look at the Biden agenda, okay, so let's break down facts. Okay, what has he done? What have they done? During the pandemic, they gave people $1,400 checks. They said there was going to be $2,000 checks, but it was $1,400. Okay, so you got to give them half credit for that, right? You have that. I mean, it's a half credit because he lied, but it's still, we're gonna be nice. We're gonna give him half credit.
I ain't gonna be nice. I'm still waiting on my $600.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. He still owes us $600. But there's a lot more negatives than positives. So I'm trying to be nice. So you have that. You have the. Trump did do what was it? The coronavirus vaccine. Warp Speed he followed through on Warp Speed. We got a vaccine, right? That's good. People are getting vaccinated. The vaccine was free for for Americans, right? Testing and getting the vaccine was free. Very similar to how the rest of the developed world has universal health care. We have a small taste of it, right? We get a small taste of it, right? They brought childhood poverty down with the tax credit, right? The tax credit that they had for parents. So they had that, and they let it expire. So when they had it, it was good. These are positive things. But that expired last December. So 1/3 of children that were taken out of poverty are now going to fall back into poverty because that program is not continuing. They started to, this is now me switching to the bad things. The eviction moratorium did continue, but now it's lifted. Now, millions of Americans are going to be evicted during a pandemic. Remember, 40
starting
million
in May to be precise, but yes.
Yeah. So again, we're going to do facts. 40 million Americans lost their jobs because of the pandemic. Overwhelming majority of a large portion of Americans are quitting their jobs because their jobs are not providing hazard pay. They're not providing pay raises, and they still want people to work for chicken nuggets, basically. and people are quitting. They are not working for bare bones stuff. So what did we see? What have we seen? Well, we've seen corporations that got loans and got quantitative easing from the government during the pandemic when the economy was bad. We've seen those same companies that were begging the United States Treasury for money use that money for stock buybacks. They did not invest it into their employees. We are seeing that when it came to, again, we're in a pandemic. One thing that would have helped during this pandemic is Biden using executive orders and executive power, which he has the power to do, to give Americans Medicare. There's a provision in the Affordable Care Act where during times of extreme crisis, like a pandemic, the president can give Americans Medicare. That's in the Obamacare. That's in the Affordable Care Act. That's under the power of the presidency. He hasn't done that. We haven't done that. We don't have a public option. We're nowhere near close to that. Well, he could. He hasn't. The student loan debt, nothing on that. When it comes to voting rights, we are a week, literally a week after Martin Luther King, after having Martin Luther King's holiday, which there's a whole other stuff that we need to talk about on that one. Have we done HR 1, which was the For the People Act, or the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, or the George Floyd Police Accountability Act? Has any of those things passed? No. So, what about gun violence? Has there been any legislation on gun control? Because we still have mass shootings and terrorist attacks, like the terrorist attack that happened at the synagogue over the weekend. Has that last weekend? Has that been addressed? No. Has anything been addressed on infrastructure? We have a bipartisan infrastructure bill that passed. That's a corporate giveaway bill, but it was bipartisan. So for mainstream media, they care about it being bipartisan, but it did nothing tangible for the American people, except help corporations to privatize roads and bridges so that we have to pay tolls everywhere we go.
Oh, hear that.
So has Biden done anything in from the child tax credit to expanding Medicare to cover vision and dental to helping fight back against climate change? The one good thing, and I say this because I want to make sure I say this, one good thing that the media crapped on him for the one good thing that he did do. He stopped the war in Afghanistan. He brought the troops home. Everybody in mainstream media was crapping on him for doing it. The defense contractors, everybody was crying about why is he doing that? That's the one objective thing that I say for his presidency was objectively a good thing. That and the $1,400 checks, the UBI checks, and also not charging everybody and giving out the vaccine for free for Americans. Those good three things are 100% unabashed good. Those things are good, and he should continue to do things like that. Other than that, the rest of his promises that he promised on the campaign, he has not touched with a 10-foot pole.
Yeah. Thank you, Lawrence. You hit on some really important stuff. I think I'm going to frame kind of my comments. Like, I think, so we're talking about broken promises. There's a root broken promise that I think we should really examine more closely. And we heard this a lot during Biden's campaign, and it was a promise from himself and people in his campaign on how he was planning to govern. And the main things you heard, it's like, I'm going to be FDR. Yeah, I'm going to be an FDR type. I'm going to be like an LBJ type. the one thing he said, even like against like opponents like Bernie Sanders, is like, I know I've been in politics. I know how to play the game. I can get concessions from conservatives in my party and conservatives on the other side. And he has really just been instead a doormat. And speaking about Mansion and Cinema, but also like just surrendering to like the Senate parliamentarian. That's why we don't have a $15 minimum wage. That's why immigration was not in the infrastructure bill, and it was a completely arbitrary decision.
Andy, one thing I have to say this. I'm so sorry. But you brought it up. The Remain in Mexico policy. He continued Trump's horrible policy, so much so that he's deported more Haitian immigrants and Latino immigrants than Trump has this time. At the same amount of time Trump had. He's deported more people than Donald Trump while continuing to do Trump's horrible policy. Same thing with the Iran deal. Same thing with the Trump's tax cuts. He's continued to do the horrible policies that Donald Trump did, that he said during the primary that he was going to go against, that he wasn't going to do. That should tell you everything that you need to know about Biden.
Yeah, in fact, there's a good piece from Democracy Now!, I think we'll link it. Like, the Biden administration is literally going to court to defend that decision, and that includes the continuity of that policy from people like, Stephen Miller and the Trump administration. It's really, it's like one of the most fundamental broken promises. One of the things that got him elected, he harped on the inhumane treatment of immigrants, and what we got instead was an administration that is focusing on how, like, well, the concentration camps are a little bit nicer now. It's like, let's not call them that. Oh, God.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please?
Make sure you follow us on Instagram to keep up to date with what's going on here at Wider. Also, check out our website, updated weekly by some of our amazing staff, online at widrfm.org.
And again, continuing like the Remain in Mexico thing, which, part of that was triggered by the COVID pandemic, and the CDC and most civil rights groups you talk to say like it's completely unnecessary, but the Biden administration wants to continue it anyway. And I want to go back to so this protestation that you hear from Joe Biden is like, oh, my hands are tied. Look at the Republican Party or Kristen Sinema, Joe Manchin. One thing I want to bring up: the media's failure in taking that at face value, and also not informing the American public on the historical precedent for a lot of this stuff. I mentioned LBJ. Definitely, president had his flaws, but he twisted a lot of arms to get his Great Society programs through. And as we see, Joe Biden isn't even willing to like get up from his seat. Good example being like, again, the parliamentarian thing, but, looking student loans as an example, his abdication from that campaign promise is one of the most egregious, because he has the power right now to do that with a stroke of a pen. And in fact, he had, I think the Office of Budget looked into it and gave him a report, and his administration literally redacted the portions that pointed out that, yes, you could executive order a reduction or elimination of student loans. So it's very obvious to anybody who even looks into this that Biden could do some of the stuff, and he just doesn't want to. But the liberal media in particular is satisfied saying like, well, he's trying to do this, his agenda is stalled because of X, Y, and Z. And also just pointing out,
yes, you have rotating villains. Absolutely. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Let me just finish real quick. So the whole Manchin and Cinema thing, I want to put a fine point on. A lot of media attention's been on them, but again, historical precedents. We almost saw the exact same thing happen during the Obama years, when Obama was pushing the ACA, it got whittled down. And by the way, it was conservative to begin with, literally mostly made by the Heritage Foundation, but it was conservative elements in his own party, like Joe Lieberman, etc., that excised the bits about the public option. And Obama had almost like a line for line response similar to Biden, saying like, well, I wish I could do this, but conservatives in my party won't let me. It's almost, it's kind of like wrestling. It's like you need these characters, these figures to play the heel. So like Kristen Sinema and Joe Manchin, they're the heel right now. They're the ones, they're playing the villains. They're like, oh, it's like, we got to stand up for the filibuster, blah, blah, blah. And the president and others in Congress kind of scapegoat them. But at the same time, all the wrestlers get paid by the same company. So it's just
companies.
Yeah.
So to add just to that point, so way back, and I want everybody to remember this, way back in December of 2020, the debt ceiling was a big issue. Are we going to basically pay our bills? We do this every year, right? Are we going to pay our bills? I want to remind everyone who's listening to this that they raised the debt ceiling. They raised the debt ceiling, and they used the filibuster. They amended the filibuster way back in December of 2020 to raise the debt ceiling. But they do not want to augment or change the filibuster for Americans to have a $15 minimum wage. And let me remind everybody who is listening now, the federal minimum wage, the federal yearly salary for most federal employees across the country is $15,000 a year. The average American makes less than $35,000 a year. Raising it to $15 an hour is the bare minimum that we can do. But most Americans, especially federal employees, most of them don't even make that. So, comes to voting rights, the redistribution of money to the working and middle class and just Americans. Why do they not want to do this? Because the same corporations and same bodies of power benefit from the system as it is. They don't want to raise money. They don't want us to raise money. They want us to struggle just enough so that we will not complain about the crumbs that they are getting. And that's what it is. And Biden, Harris, the Democratic establishment, so that's Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, and the rest of them, Joe Manchin, Kristen Sinema, and the rest of them, and the hateful eight that voted against the $15 minimum wage earlier last year, we see that they benefit from the system as it is. So they don't want to change it. And if you're in their position, why would you? They're multi-millionaires. Why would I want to change the system that's going to cause me to make less money? From a logical perspective, I get why they're doing it, but they're heartless. That also makes them heartless individuals, because that's not your job. Your job is to do the bidding of the American people. They're choosing not to for their own financial interests.
Yeah, 100%.
Hey, this is Wider reminding you not to drink and drive. Alcoholic consumption while driving reduces function of the brain, impairs your thinking, reasoning, and muscle coordination. Driving after drinking can be very deadly. Instead, plan a safe ride home with a designated driver or call a sober friend to pick you up. This has been a message from 89.1 Wider FM, online at widrfm.org.
On that, and again, we always it's a very simple thing. Our show has changed a lot over last few years since it started, but something that really hasn't. It's like, if you want to understand most of the issues that we talk about, follow the money. It's like, Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema, they say they're doing it to we need to more bipartisanship or the sanctity of the filibuster, and it's much more informative to look at their campaign finance records and see who's giving them their money, because I can assure you, Kristen Sinema knows how stupid her argument sounds. She's literally being paid to say it.
Can I also just one other thing? I want people to understand how disgusting that really is when you hear people say they're upholding the sanctity of the filibuster. First of all, the filibuster is not in the Constitution, is not a part of the Constitution. It was a rule, a rule to protect Southern slave owners. Case in point, the majority of the time when the filibuster was being used, it was being used to go against anti-lynching laws. That was what the original filibuster was used for. After that, it was used to fight against civil rights legislation. So I want you to think about that. When Manchin and Sinema are saying that they want to uphold the tradition of the filibuster, they want to uphold the sanctity of the filibuster, when Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and other leadership are saying that we need to protect the filibuster, they're saying we need to protect the rights of the minority party to stop progress for disenfranchised Americans, especially Black and brown people. That's what they're saying. Because that's not what they're saying with their words. That's what they're saying with their actions. And with the history that's tied to it.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that there's a few more things I want to hit on, particular issues that stood out to me. I want to spend a little bit of time talking about imperialism and kind of the state of foreign policy under Biden. And this is something that is really interesting because, his campaign promises for policy basically just revolved around I'm going to be a better statesman, and I agree we need to get out of Afghanistan. And Biden did say a lot about ending the war on terror. And I want to take a little bit of a deeper look at that. So I agree with you, Lawrence. Pulling out of Afghanistan was something that needed to happen. It was a good decision. But I also want to remind my listeners of a couple things. One, there are still airstrikes going on there, which is probably the most despicable legacy of the war on terror, above and beyond just troop presence, collateral damage, etc. And then, of course, as we mentioned at the top of the show, the military budget is even higher than it was under Trump. And we're also starting to see, one last thing about Afghanistan, and I will, there's a really great piece, Democracy Now! Just interviewed someone about it. They really dive into this. But the United States has pivoted to crippling sanctions on Afghanistan, ostensibly to punish the Taliban. But what's probably going to happen is more or less what happened in Iraq, whereas it's going to starve people out. It's going to create a human rights just atrocity. And the Taliban's going to be able to turn right around and be like, hey, this is what the United States empire thinks about you. It wants you to starve, et cetera, et cetera. And then also, and this has also been coming up in recent days, the kind of Cold War pivot against Russia and China. we've seen like this standoff now between him and Putin over Ukraine. Again, a lot of the Cold War rhetoric around China we've seen since he first came into office. And what's interesting to me, it almost seems like, as we all know, you know your American history well enough, presidents and administrations will pivot towards a foreign adversary when there's trouble on the home front. Now, what Trump did, largely, he retained a lot of Islamophobia, but he painted a lot of like homebound actors as trouble. Like we need to go to war against Antifa and BLM. It seems to me like Joe Biden. There's two responses to that. Either you can, face down these like fascism head on. You can do social programs that make people believe in governance again, and actually concretely improve people's lives. That can prevent them from looking at fascist alternatives or being against the state. Or you can find a foreign adversary to draw everyone's attention to. And right now, they just dumped a bunch of military aid onto the Ukraine, and I just got to point out this big irony with the whole Ukraine situation. It's complicated. I'm definitely not on I'm not pro Putin or whatever, but a lot of those separatist groups in Ukraine. This was the president who said the reason he decided to run for president this time was because of what happened in Charlottesville. And a huge chunk of that money is being given to separatist groups in the Ukraine that are explicitly neo-Nazi. So it's like in the interest of maintaining like our imperial hegemony, let's pour some money into it's just like the 80s in Latin America. Here's some right-wing paramilitary death squads. Here's some money, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, the state of imperialism's war has gotten just objectively worse since the Biden administration has come into office.
I mean, not just that. Like, I agree with that, but also going more to it goes more to the thought process. Why are we escalating tension? Like outside of yes, Putin and others wanting Ukraine and things of that nature, or the Rohingya Muslims that are being abused by China. All those things are 100% true. All those things are cruel. You know what I'm saying? I'm a humanist, so when other human beings are being treated treated badly by other humans, I want to fight against abuses of power, whoever it is, right? At the same time, are we going to sacrifice? Are we willing to? In that ideology, or what's going on with Putin or Biden, are we going to spend more time focusing on that, on those issues with those other countries, than worrying about the fact that a majority of our country, a large portion of our country, doesn't have clean drinking water? Or are we going to keep putting more money into military bases around the world that further antagonizes violence or responses from these other countries? Instead of trying to bomb or shoot our way to peace, right? We should be taking, I don't want to say an isolationist approach, but we should be taking a much more diplomatic approach to not just dealing with foreign adversaries, quote unquote. I know, but we should be taking a more. We should be taking better steps to move towards peace, or much more peaceful negotiations with these quote-unquote adversaries, right? But we also have to remember that during this pandemic, those same countries benefited from the vaccines that we were making, that they also were making, because a lot of their people also got sick too. You know, and that's the thing. I think that's the main thing that bothers me with a lot of the Cold War rhetoric. Because again, defense contractors want to keep selling bombs and weapons, and we need to be in a war to justify selling more bombs and weapons. We shouldn't be. We should be taking that money that instead of going to instead of going towards the military budget, and putting that money back into the hands of the American people, either with upgrading our infrastructure, giving people a UBI check. Hell, we spent $14 trillion on the war on terror, correct? That was the last time I checked, and it was like Amnesty International or somebody said that we spent $14 trillion on the war on terror. We could have used that $14 trillion and gave reparations to black people. Like, there's other ways that we can spend our money when we're not causing more violence on an international scale.
Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on WIDR Kalamazoo or online at widrfm.org. We are in the middle of our discussion about the first year of the Biden administration. Keep your dial locked.
Oh, yeah, I totally agree. I think so. There's like three other issues I want to.
Oh, wait. I did want to point out one thing. I'm sorry. There's one other thing. We've had 28 non-violent protesters arrested at the Capitol. We have multiple pastors and activists in Georgia who are on hunger strikes because the Biden administration has failed to pass voting rights. They have failed to make sure that voting rights in America will not be taken away. And we have seen since the beginning of last year, GOP states that are ran by the GOP passed voter suppression laws and gerrymandering laws. We have seen that. These things are fact, right? And we have also seen throughout the year, not just over last year and throughout the years, multiple black men, women, and people of color being slain because of the war on terror, war on drugs, right? These are all things that we have seen. We also know that our president could, with executive orders, take marijuana off of being a Schedule I drug, and that would disproportionately help against the war on drugs. And he hasn't done it. He hasn't done that. Kamala Harris hasn't pushed him again for that, and all that means is that more people, especially in this country, will be locked up for non-violent drug offenses with this president who, and especially brown and black people, people of color, when that's the base of the party that needs to turn out if the Democrats are going to hold the House and the Senate. They are literally doing everything that they can to make sure that they lose, in that the people that they needed to come and turn out in Georgia and in other places don't the next time there's the midterm or presidential election.
Yeah, I agree. Sometimes I wonder, even like all of this draconian Jim Crow voter suppression the Republicans are doing, like if the Democrats keep doing what they're doing, like I don't even know if they'll need to suppress votes. It's like you need to do something to excite and engage your base Unfortunately, like it's just when a lot of that base are like working class people, or what your base is supposed to be until you abandon them to like tech capitalists. It's if you don't have tangible results and improve their material needs, it's much harder to draw them out than it is for like a Republican candidate who just needs to basically toss out the red meat. Here's what you need to be outraged about today. I
mean, let's go, Brandon, right? But here's the thing. That's all they have. And this is the sad part. And if you notice, and I don't know if you noticed this in the mainstream media, like Trump and some of the other Republicans have been saying they need their voters to get vaccinated. Because remember, Tucker Carlson and also Jimmy Dore and others were all on this anti-vax kick, right? They like everything else in the world will work. Ivermectin and all this other stuff, monoclonal antibodies and all this other stuff. Failing to understand that the same companies that make the vaccine also make those other drugs. But I digress. A lot of their voters have died during this pandemic. A lot of right-wing, non-vaccinated, anti-vaxxer voters have passed. So now the rhetoric on the right wing is saying that, we should get vaccinated, we should be better protected. Remember, they were anti-mask and all this stuff. They are slowly starting to realize that they may not win because a lot of their voters have died. And it's sad, but it's true.
It's very short-sighted. There was a great article about how the astroturfing of those open up the economy protests last year, they were backed by the usual suspects like the Coke Industries, etc. And yeah, you're right. It is really short-sighted because in the short term you can drum up some outrage politics over, I want the freedom to not wear a mask and go to the gym and not get vaccinated. But
they want people to get back to work. They want people to get back to work. But you can't get people to get back to work if they're dying.
Yeah, and in the long run, you're going to literally kill your voter base, I think actually that segues well. So there's 3 other issues I wanted to hit on, and then we can move on to some other stuff. But the Biden administration response to COVID, climate change, and policing. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the response to COVID. Started out well, vaccination rates, etc. But recently we've had more COVID cases and deaths since the pandemic started. The Omicron variant is much more contagious, this is another instance of Joe Biden playing kind of willfully ignorant. I think he literally said nobody saw this coming, when in fact just about every disease pathologist I could think of said if we don't have mass masking and mass vaccination, this disease will mutate and other variants will emerge. So literally anybody who follows medical science saw it coming. Except Joe Rogan's audience, who thinks that it's only except Joe Rogan's audience, who only thinks that it's because people are fat and unhealthy. That's the reason why they're getting the disease. Yeah, but that's not a joke. That's not a joke or a punchline. It's probably the single biggest letdown because, he said, I will deal with the COVID pandemic like an adult, which may be true to a certain extent, but he's also dealing with it like a capitalist. The CDC saying, you only need to go home for 5 days instead of 2 weeks, just purely financial. They pounded out that's how long it would take for the economy to zonk out. And particularly when you take a broader view, we've seen most of the rest of the world has done things, policies, decisions that has, kept their population safe from COVID. And, part of it is masking, part of it is vaccination. A bigger part of it is shutting the economy down as needed and paying people to stay home, which ironically happened during the early part when Trump was president. But they've been very hesitant to do that, even though it's been shown around the rest of the world when you do that, particularly in a targeted way, you can drastically reduce the spread of COVID. But big business does not want stuff shutting down again. They don't want schools shutting down again, because then, like, well, if the kids are home, then, you know, where the parents will have to stay home too, and they you know, they're not able to go to work. So we've seen, like, the promises of a better COVID response hit the wall of basically their loyalty to the wishes and desires of big business and capitalism, which again prizes its bottom line over human lives.
Pretty much, 100%. The other aspect of that is why do you think like paid sick leave? Paid sick leave was one of the first things to get killed and build back better. I mean, that's one of those things. Why do you think not just paid family leave, but the child tax credit? Why do you think that was also was able to? They didn't make it permanent. They chose to have it expire. All those things. Big business likes, but big business likes those things when it's convenient for them. In other words, when it will allow those parents and those workers to go to work. You know what I'm saying? When it allows them to go to work, then big business is all for them. When it no longer serves that purpose, nah, all those things need to be gone. It makes it, as you said, it would benefit Americans for it to happen, for us to continue to have those policies, but it doesn't benefit big business. They'll be losing money. We can't lose money. If we lose, like that doesn't make sense for them. I think it shows where Biden's loyalty lies. Is he doing these things because it will benefit the American people, or is he choosing to not fight for these policies, or to fight or to lackadaisically hope and pray that Kristen Sinema and Joe Manchin will do the right thing and fight for and vote for those policies when he knows they won't? When they are paid for and bought by the same corporations that fight against those policies.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, kind of on that line. So I wanted to hit on climate change real quick. So a lot of people point to the fact that we rejoined the Paris Climate Agreement. Now I do want to stop there. Like, the Paris Climate Agreement was never very strong to begin with. It was non-binding. Most serious climate scientists, most serious climate scientists will tell you, like, it doesn't do nearly what is needed, and it's also non-binding. So, like, it really it's I would say at best it's virtue signaling, which some people might see as kind of harsh. And, you know, some people might say it's like, well, it's better than under Trump, where he denied it outright. And it's like, well, climate change is a zero-sum issue. You either do what's necessary to fight climate breakdown, or we're screwed. So, like, in that sense, like, yeah, it might make you or particular countries feel better about themselves, but it doesn't really address the issue. And of course, those climate provisions were like some of the first things to get the chopping block and to build back better. And we've also seen Joe Biden continue issuing offshore drilling permits and demanding for the increase of gas production. So he's really, like, speaking out of two sides of his mouth on this issue. It's like, oh yeah, climate change is a very serious issue, but we're going to keep drilling and do stuff that the scientists tell us not to do.
I mean, you have to remember Chevron and BP and Exxon. Those are some of the biggest establishment Democrats and Republicans. It's not just big oil, it's also Republicans. And if they're saying, yo, these policies will hurt our profits. You will know your role, shut your mouth, and you will not pass these policies. And I don't care who dies in the process. That's just what they do. That's where we're at in this country.
And then I think the last thing I wanted to hit on before we moved on to some other issues. Policing. So, you know, there are a lot of big promises about addressing police brutality. You know, obviously the rhetoric from Joe Biden even going in is like he wanted to run away from like defund the police rhetoric as fast as possible. In fact, the Democrats, actually, the establishment Democrats, blamed like defund the police and a lot of the BLM uprisings we saw last year as like a reason the election was so close. So, I mean, it was never really expected that he was going to follow through on a lot of this stuff, but it has completely stalled out. The idea of like police oversight commissions stalled. As a matter of fact, like the recent legislation is actually giving local police departments more money to spend, and it's this whole idea of retraining and such. It's interesting to me how like it's an example of a really huge contradiction. The general public, the majority says there's like problems with policing that need to be fixed. At the time that it happened, more people supported the burning of a police station in Minneapolis than they supported Donald Trump or Joe Biden. But we're seeing a really big regression and backlash to that. And I wouldn't even say we're at square one. It's like they're really pushing back. Even a lot of cities and municipalities that have pledged to do police reform, police defunding, have kind of thrown that out the window. And again, you know, we have a vice president who is kind of part of that cop culture. So it's very interesting to me how, like, you know, that Left Voice article really pointed out how the Democratic Party tried to co-opt like BLM and stuff, while simultaneously, legislatively, working materially against the demands of those movements.
Oh, absolutely, 100%. That's not even close or even a question. Like I said earlier, the president could do something very simple. He could legalize marijuana on a federal level, so it's no longer a Schedule 1 or Schedule 2 drug, and that would dramatically help against the war on drugs, right? Freeing non-violent drug offenders, putting money into the communities where we have seen police over-police the community because of non-violent drug offenses, and stopping things like civil asset forfeiture laws, or taking away funding, or making the police departments that do violate Americans' rights, having those police departments pay out of their own budget, not by the taxpayer, but out of their own budget for the settlement. There's a lot of things that our president could do. And he's choosing to kick the can down the road. That's what he's choosing.
That's a really great point. Oh, sorry.
No, I mean that's the thing that I feel like when we talk about tangible things that would benefit Americans, because I also want to remind folks that the war on drugs doesn't, even though it disproportionately affects brown and black people, especially black people, it also disproportionately affects poor minorities of poor people as well. This is as much of a class issue as it is a race issue. Because as as stay-at-home moms can make millions of dollars selling edibles in California, there are black and brown kids in Texas and in Mississippi and in other places who are having their voting rights and lives ruined because of the drug war, because of the war on drugs that Biden was the grandfather of. He was. And Kamala Harris helped to make worse when she was AG of California. So I would encourage everyone to read the new Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander, Race Matters by Dr. Cornel West, and other books, so you can get a better scope on what our president can do to fix these things, and also how we got here in the first place.
Oh, thank you, Lawrence. And I think I want to tie everything together, and then we can kind of move on to other topics of discussion. But what you said about kicking the can down the road, that really resonated with me. Is I really think, with the exception of a few, the Democratic Party completely misunderstands just how much road it has left. And I want to go back to some comments and thoughts I had around the time of Biden's inauguration. And one of the points I really stressed, especially right in the shadow of January 6th, was, we are historically, if you know your history, we are in a very dangerous place. It's like Rosa Luxemburg once said, socialism or barbarism. And something that the administration, and I think most of the Democratic Party, does not understand is that if the prescription here is you need to offer people a vote. You need to invest in the kind of basic, reforms that are in like the Build Back Better Act, stuff that's been pushed by people like Bernie Sanders and AOC, because we just had a beer hall push. And let me explain what I mean by that. About 10 years before the Nazis took power, Hitler attempted a coup, famously called the beer hall push, as him and a bunch of Nazi thugs tried to overtake the government. At the time, it was unsuccessful, and the media wrote it off as a big joke. And then 10 years later, we had, the fire, and the rest is history. So the big danger here is if we don't get the kind of tangible, sweeping social democratic reforms that will tangibly improve people's lives, they will continue getting duped into following fascist demagogues, and there ain't gonna be no amount of "listen here, Jack" or anything like that will change it. But I think it's like you've got so many just neoliberals, Clinton School Democrats in the Democratic Party, they can't even understand or see that, and that is the real danger. If we don't get some improvements, then come 2024, I would place my bet on another Nazi clown getting into office, and probably one who's a lot worse. Potentially Donald Trump. I could foresee an outcome where that's another broken promise. They haven't prosecuted anything, even though he's provably guilty of many, many crimes that would bar him from running for office again. But I recall, you remember the Pied Piper strategy from 2016? The idea let's elevate this unpopular, toxic guy, and Hillary Clinton will be able to run and sweep the election. And I'm almost wondering if if we get to a point where they are completely resistant to social reform, would they allow Trump to run again just so they have a building to run against? And my thought is yeah, they might.
I'm right along with you. I think that's definitely something that they would do. I mean, I do not doubt that for a second, because democratic incompetence knows no bounds, especially the consultant. I've gone into the wrong profession. I should have been a democratic consultant, because that's the only job where you can be wrong a majority of the time and they still hire you. For real. There's no reason on planet Earth why someone like Claire McCaskill or some of the other Democrats who ran as Republican light are MSNBC contributors, like Simone Sanders. She just left the administration, left being a part of Kamala Harris' administration after the horrible conversation that Kamala Harris had with Charlamagne the God on the show. And now she's an MSC contributor. After being wronged and being a part of Hillary Clinton's campaign and all these neoliberal campaigns and just being wrong. And I feel like so to go back to the point, I know I just went on a really weird tangent. It makes sense if you look at what's the objective. Is the objective to hold power? If the objective is to hold power, then they would want to make sure more Democrats vote. Republicans have shown that the more people vote, the more likely they are to lose. They don't want that. They literally said that out loud, right? We know that the country is in a populist rage, and it's in a populist rage so that people like someone like Tucker Carlson, a buffoon with a bow tie, can be the number one cable host in the United States.
Want to get weekly updates from the Wider directors? Head on over to our website at widerfm.org.
Click on Weekly Newsletter tab.
Yes. The newsletter come up. I want to really read about all DJs, what they listen to, all these announcements.
Yes, you can also find an invite link to our Discord where we post updated information about upcoming shows, events, and all things Wider.
It's very exciting. This has been a message from 89.1 Wider FM, online at widrfm.org.
All these things are true, but what is the Democratic Party doing? The Democratic Party is choosing to let these numbnuts continue to win, and continue to out-organize them to make their argument while providing nothing for their own base. The Republican Party is always going to be against progress. The Conservative Party will always be against progress and is always for racist, misogynistic ideology. That is what their bread and butter is on. Look at the Southern strategy. We don't have to talk about that anymore. Or just recently with Trump and what the Republicans talked about today. They don't have plans on fixing the economy or anything of the sort. All they want to do is give tax cuts to their corporations and stow up hatred for authoritarian ideology. That's all Republicans are going to do. Democrats are saying, hey, we can still work with these fascists and work with these authoritarians while also serving our donors. But hey, regular people, we have your back. Now go back out there and die for the profits of these corporations.
Yeah, I hear you, and it's again, I guess, another famous quote. America is a one-party state, but with typical American extravagance, they have two of them, and with the exception of people like Bernie Sanders, AOC, Ilhan, etc., like a handful of people, it does definitely seem like a lot of the party, just from lack of doing anything, would advocate for diet fascism rather than any sort of real progress.
You did go ahead. Sorry.
I'm just gonna say I want to close out like a little bit of hope. This is in this last year, outside of the Biden administration, there's been a tremendous amount of progress when it comes to labor organizing, when it comes to the street mobilizations have quieted down, but again, we have a whole new generation of organizers and activists who are making tangible demands for police abolition and prison abolition and defunding and such. So we have had some wins. It's just not in, primarily not in the typical power structure of the government. But like as it said, now is not the time to take a nap. We have to ride those in power as much as possible, not only to get the kind of future we need, but to try to stopgap some of the more reactionary, fascistic elements that they're in real danger of coming into power in the next few years. With that, Lawrence, I'm going to take.
Absolutely, man.
All right, I'm going to take a quick little break. We come back. We got more to discuss on the show.
Do you identify as a zillennial with a quarter-life crisis upcoming? Well, if so, and even if not, you should come check out my show, Thursday nights, 10 p.m. to midnight, Drum the Bass, where we play some of the best breakbeats and D&B tunes in the scene on 89.1 Wider FM.
All right, so that was.
What do you want?
Oh, well, I was just gonna say. So that was kind of our analysis of Biden year one. I think we've got. Lawrence,
I forgot to add one thing.
Oh, go right ahead. Yeah.
I forgot to add one thing. If you want to know how Biden year one was, let's look at his approval rate when he was when he ended the war of Afghanistan, right? And when he gave out those checks, he had a very high approval rating. It was in the 60s. It was close to the 70s. And at the tail end of his of year one, his approval rating, Kamala Harris' approval rating, is in the 30s and lower. Actually, Kamala Harris has a worse approval rating than Nancy Pelosi. Like they have squandered an opportunity to not just be popular because it would be good politics, but they squandered an opportunity to have good policy. They squandered to support good policy that would have their people, their constituents, come out and vote for them. That's the one thing that you cannot ignore. That during this time where we could have changed, they could have really done a groundbreaking change. They have chose to be the white moderate that Dr. King talked about in his letter from a Birmingham jail.
Yeah, I definitely hear that. And again, mentioned Martin Luther King Day was a couple weeks ago, and yeah, we always get this is around the time of year where moderates and conservatives try to appropriate Dr. King, even though, as most of my listeners I hope know, towards the end of his life in particular, MLK was very critical of imperialism, capitalism. His last campaign was, the poor people's campaign. So, excuse me. He always was very critical of, the white moderates inhibiting progress. And it's certainly a lot of what we've seen in this year. So, Lawrence, I think I'm going to kick it to you. I know there's a few other issues you wanted to talk about. Well, I still had you on the line. My voice is getting a little creaky, so I think I'm just going to toss it to you. If you want to just start in with what you wanted to talk about, go right ahead.
Well, let's talk about Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King Day was last week, and if you haven't read things like Sword and Shield, or Where Have We Gone From Here, Chaos and Community, these are great books that you should look up, that you should read. The public library has them. If you don't have any money, you should go get them and read them. They are when you talk about communal, when you talk about organizing, or talk about the ideology that he fought for. King, if we also have to remember during that time, especially towards the end, to the later parts of his life, he was the most hated man in America. It wasn't because of him fighting for the economic well-being of Black people in America. He also understood that with change coming, with civil rights, voting rights, Fair Housing Act, and things of that nature that happened after he died, that these things would positively affect all Americans, not just minorities, not just Black people, but all Americans. And the policies that he stood for, he basically stood for the same type of policies that FDR talked about, that like before him. Americans should have universal health care. Americans should have a universal basic income. Americans should have universal education, universal housing for Americans, and that it is an abhorrent notion. This is a quote that one of my favorite quotes that he said. It is a horrid notion, or a regressive notion to look at the results of income inequality and the results of the dehumanization of human beings, and then advocate for policies that continue it. I say all that to say, multiple people who were quoting MLK were the kind of people that would advocate for the continuation of policies that dehumanize and harm Americans and other human beings. Case in point, Christian Cinema, Hillary Clinton were some very standout few that tried to tweet and try to use Martin Luther King Day to talk about how they agree and fight for the policies and ideologies for the world that he wanted to bring. I want to remind y'all that during that same time, Hillary Clinton was a Goldwater girl. She would have hated King's guts. Everything that she still stands for today. She doesn't stand for universal health care. They don't stand for universal free college tuition or any of the other policies that I just said. They hated King's guts. But they tried to whitewash him and dumb down his message when he was a democratic socialist and a revolutionary and a radical. So that leads, so you have people like them that makes me laugh. And the quote from Dr. King's granddaughter and family members, their tweets about how some of these people are trying to whitewash their grandfather, whitewash King. Their quote saying, "If you don't believe in his policies, don't quote him today. If y'all don't believe in voting rights, don't quote him today. Leave it alone." I thought that's over amazing. But it leads me to Steven Crowder. I don't like talking about Steven Crowder because he's a horrible, ridiculous individual. But he made this segment about how Dr. Martin Luther King was pro-violence because Dr. Martin Luther King, one of his quotes was saying that riots are the language of the unheard, and what America fails to hear is the suffering and the torture that the American Negro and others were facing, and how everything that Dr. Martin Luther King's agenda should be should be erased because of his extramarital affairs and things of that nature, completely ignoring everything that King stood for, talked about, advocated for, and all the things that King supported would help people like Crowder. It makes me angry. It made me angry, but I was happy to see that there are some people who don't mind taking their mask off on how they will support and celebrate ideology and policies that will harm other human beings. And Crowder is a prime example of that. If you haven't seen that clip on YouTube of him talking about Martin Luther King, save yourself some trouble, don't see it, don't watch it, because it's not gonna work. But there's people like him that I have to say thank you for at least taking your mask off so we can see who you really are. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, and excellent point. And I think, like, I mean, I kind of just you pretty much everything I would want to say. Again, there's some really good literature and articles out there talking about like MLK's real legacy, and yeah, it's always pretty disgusting to see like some of the most retrograde figures in American politics try to like use his words for their own agenda. You know, it's like, oh, MLK wouldn't have liked this, or he wouldn't, you know, it's like he wouldn't have supported X, Y, or Z. Like maybe it's Colin Kaepernick, or he wouldn't have supported like, you know, property destruction or something like that. And again, you can go into the actual words of what MLK said, and also, you know, an interesting distinction, like, you know, riot is a language of the unheard thing that MLK said. Like, again, that's not advocating that people.
MLK
like,
wasn't for. Yeah, he was.
Yeah, well, it's always like. I think Republicans and conservatives have this weird idea that like riots are somehow like organized and like, you know, so and so decided to start a riot. It's like riots are very like organic outcomes of what happens when you push people too far and there's a boiling point. You know, I was trying to explain this to a conservative friend of mine a couple years ago. Like riots, think of riots like the weather. If you have like a low pressure system and it builds and it builds and it builds and it builds, you're going to have a storm. And the better question you should be asking is like, what caused this storm to happen? It's not trying to, you know, put some particular storm clouds in jail, you know?
Oh, no. Because remember, I'm glad you brought that up. Because it depends on who's the rioter. If the Bundy boys are rioting, then that's not a riot. If it's the Capitol rioters who were Antifa and Black Lives Matter right before, but remember, those people were Black Lives Matter and Antifa, but then they would also say in the same breath that it was a FBI plot and that the people who are going to jail are patriots. These are the same things that they would say that will come out of their mouth in the same breath, and you wonder, and it made me wonder, like. Y'all are all for property, y'all all for private property, you're all for protecting property until it's right-wing nutcases who are destroying it.
You know, that's so true. And I want like a fine point, like even within the right wing's own historiography, like there's no recognition of the hypocrisy there, because like, you know, the founding myths, or not even myths, but like the founding incidents. That a lot of, you know, kind of right-wing patriotic people point to, you know, the American Revolution or something, like, you know, the Boston Tea Party was a huge looting. It was just, they looted the tea ship. The Boston Massacre, it was literally British soldiers, they gunned down Christmas addicts, a black man, and it started a huge riot. You know, these are incidents, events, that like these right-wingers hold near and dear, but they will turn right back around and say, oh, but 200 years later, when almost, you know, some of the same, or not the same, but like 200 years later, you know, it's more important to protest taxes than it is Black lives, and one thing is right and one is not, and it's not the thing that makes more sense.
The Capitol rioters are patriots, but Colin Kaepernick meme because black people are disproportionately arrested and assaulted and have longer prison sentences for the same crimes that their white counterparts. That's un-American. You can't. These are the same people who will ban books and want to was crying so much about critical race theory, right? That was a big thing this year. Crying about critical race theory, about how that's hurting, how that's furthering the divide in America, right? Yet, these are the same people who, which was one of the stories that I wanted to talk about, but it was a quick hit and one of the stories that I wanted to talk about. You had a Republican senator that said that that teachers should be teaching both sides to Nazism. Like, and when it comes to fascism, when it comes to Marxism, when it comes to all that teachers should be neutral and teach both sides. Like there is a positive to Nazism.
What's that quote? If you're neutral to injustice, you've chosen the side of the oppressor. Some of that effect.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. It makes me laugh. It makes me laugh, but it also makes me very much so grateful for people like for people like us. And like people like the Young Turks, Democracy Now!, the Majority Report, Secular Talk, and others, Real News Network, and some others who push back against this garbage. Because the media, a large portion of the media, corporate media, side with the oppressors. They are happy being neutral and calling both sides to an issue when one side is clearly wrong.
Yeah, I definitely hear that 100%. All right. So, Lawrence, anything else on that, or anything else you want? Or I know there's a couple other things you want to hit on. Did you want to move on, or was any other thoughts on that?
We can move on. We can move on. Last point. Read Where Do We Go From Now? Where We Go From Here? Read Sword and Shield. Read. There are tons of books on King and on Malcolm X and others. Take your time and go through those books. Get the Libby app, the library app. They have those books on audiobooks. It's free. You don't even have to go inside the library and get the books. You can get them right on your phone.
Hey, this is Wider reminding you not to text and drive. We'll provide the music, you just sit back, relax, and drive safe.
Libraries are magical places. Yeah, can't hype the library. KPL has some really good stuff too. They've got a really good digital library. And, yeah, if you're trying to find some good books about like history, social justice, etc., it's a valuable resource. Okay, Lawrence. Again, my voice is kind of crackling out. Was there anything? I know there was the Kansas issue that you want to hit on.
Yeah. So there's a story out of Kansas. Let me pull it up. I need to pull it up on my tablet. Hold on. There's a story. There's a story that made me say, "What's the matter with Kansas?" You know? Hello?
Yeah, I'm still here, Lawrence. Sorry.
All right, hold on. All right, no, so I just need to pull it up real quick.
Okay. Yeah. While you're doing that, I think just a quick reminder to everybody. If you're listening online or on the radio, again, Media Cyphers, we're on Wider 89.1 WIDR or widerfm.org. Our show broadcasts every Tuesday from 12 p.m. to 2. We also have a podcast now. We kind of take the best of clips from our radio program and put them all together in a regular installment series. We've got a couple of exciting things coming out this month. If you're listening to this now, you're obviously listening to our Biden analysis. Also coming soon. Not sure which one is getting published first, but there's going to be a podcast on there. I have a conversation with Nathan Dannison. It's going to be our first book club episode where me and a guest sit down and talk about a specific book. This month of January, we talked about Jesus and John Wayne, how white evangelicals corrupted the faith and fractured a nation. Really great conversation. Reverend Nathan Dannison. We really dive into a lot of history of reactionary Christianity and also juxtapose it with far more progressive liberation theology. So you can check that out on our podcast on Podbean, and also any radio episode we broadcast, we upload those full episodes on YouTube for posterity's sake. So again, 3 ways you can check out the show: on the radio, on the internet, either on YouTube or Podbean.
Okay, so I have a story. I'm trying to find the written version so I can read it for you. So in Kansas City, the district attorney. So this happened in Kansas City, and this was also reported. This was reported on by No, tablet. What are you doing? So NBC ran the article. So did US Today. So did Democracy Now. The first time I heard about it was on Democracy Now on the 20th. So the DA is refusing to charge the jailers, the officers that were involved in a black teenager's death as a homicide, even though the coroner said it was a homicide. The DA of Kansas City is refusing to charge them with homicide because of Kansas's stand your ground law. Let me tell you about how heinous this stuff is. The 17-year-old Cedric Lofton was restrained. He was physically restrained and left prone in the jail cell, in the juvenile detention home, on the floor. He was restrained and left on the floor, face down, handcuffed. Hands behind his back, handcuffed. The kid died and the coroner, the autopsy said that it was a homicide. Reading from the article. This article is coming from USA Today. The coroner ruled a homicide to the death of a black teen who was restrained face down in the jail cell. The black teen, after struggling with officers at a jail, has been ruled a homicide by the local coroner. Law enforcement officers have put the correction officers on paid leave. First of all, these officers are given paid leave when they kill a teenager. They killed a child. Okay, a teenager's not an adult. They killed a teenager, and they're getting paid leave when they left this teenager face down on the ground. If my parents would have left me restrained, handcuffed, face down on the ground at my house, and I died, they would be arrested and gone to jail. If a teacher restrains a student, leaves them face down on the ground, and they die, they're going to jail. If a bouncer from a nightclub restrains somebody and they're left on the ground and they die, they're going to jail. Why in the hell are these officers not in jail? Okay, I'm sorry. Let me continue.
No, I mean that's a super valid question, and man, it's like, we're talking when Kurt Morale talking about the lack of action on policing. Like this is the rotten fruit that it bears out when there is not any attempt at like trying to tackle this issue at its systemic root. Now, sorry, go ahead, Lauren.
Okay. So the autopsy report said 70-year-old Cedric Lofton, I'm probably butchering his name, from Wichita, died from complications of cardiopulmonary arrest sustained after physically struggling while restraining in a prone position. Prone position. Let me remind people, that's face down on the ground and his hands are handcuffed behind him. Don't act like you don't know, you haven't seen what the prone position looks like. Is what George Floyd was in when Derek Chauvin had his knee on his neck. This 17-year-old is restrained. He has hands behind his back. His face is on the ground. They left him there. The autopsy report filed on Monday that that Lofton had no pulse 4 minutes after he was handcuffed, lying face down on the floor of the county juvenile detention facility during the early morning hours of September 24th. This kid died September 24th. This report came out December 29th of 2021. I'm just saying. And remember, the only reason why I'm bringing this up as a story is because the DA is refusing to charge these officers because of the stand your ground. What part of stand your ground is useful to a team when the person who's causing said violence towards these officers are restrained and in the prone position? Can someone explain this to me? I am missing something.
You really put a point on, like, cops, like, they give special exceptions to the violence of police officers that you don't get in any other profession. Again, like you rattled off all this, like, most normal people would be in jail. And yeah, I think as you're pointing out, using a stand your ground defense against somebody who is literally restrained is improbable, impossible, and just absolutely ridiculous. And this isn't just like some defense attorney who's making this point. It's like you said, the DA. So it's somebody who has a position, an elected position of power, who is trying to protect a homicide in this fashion. Which again is just really just another example of what drove people into the streets 2 years ago.
I want to remind, again, and I want people to understand, this is not new. We saw this before. Remember, Ahmaud Arbery got murdered by 3 people. It took them 74 days to arrest the 3 men that ran down and shot this man while he was jogging. Why did it take them 74 days? Because the DA, the district attorney, and the other people who saw the clip, that saw them ride down on that man and kill him, said there's nothing to see here. We have a law saying that the citizen's arrest was justified in murdering this black jogger. We have seen, not just in southern states and also in other states, that they justify the murder of people who are literally defenseless. The kid is face down on the ground and tied on his back. How is he a threat? How does stand your ground work? Because if I remember correctly, stand your ground and these type of laws are supposed to be used when imminent threat is done is brought upon you. If someone has a knife or a gun, if you have some way to defend yourself, you could do so. This kid is restrained. The kid is restrained and is prone on the ground. There's no way for him to be a threat to the police officer. And the DA that's choosing to refuse, that's choosing to not indict these officers on homicide, as the medical coroner says it is, should be in jail.
Oh, I agree 100%. All right, Lawrence, we're running a little low on time. I wanted to leave some space when we get on the radio to talk about some like local stories and such. Were there any other quick hits you wanted to...
Hello, listeners. So, again, that was our long-form discussion. That was me and Lawrence talking about the first year of the Biden administration. Also talked about Martin Luther King Day and the way that he often gets kind of whitewashed and defanged around this time of year. And, of course, that very unfortunate and chilling story of police brutality from Kansas. There is a few more minutes of that. You can find the full thing over on our podcast. That's Media Cyphers Kalamazoo over at Podbean, and you should be able to find that in most podcast apps. Anyway, we're about to slide into my music show. That's Electro Pop Therapy, but I do want to let y'all know again, you can find us online at Podbean. You can find our page on Facebook, and we also have a YouTube page where we upload our full radio episodes. Anyway, keep that locked. I'm about to switch hats, so to speak, from politics to electropop. And until next time, keep on fighting for that revolution solution.